Good afternoon. As you can figure out, I'm the third, so I'm Judy Sherry, the president and co-founder of Grandparents Against Gun Violence. And like everybody else today, I'm saying thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm very lucky. I'm going to say a few things that I didn't plan to say, but I'm very lucky. I'm probably in what people would call a group of white privilege. I haven't faced the challenges that we've heard about today. But I'm going to take a little riff on what John said this morning and just ask you to close your eyes a minute and try to think of the challenges I am facing. Got them all closed? Okay. Number one, I'm following absolutely incredible speakers. Number two, it's pretty late in the day. Number three, I'm from Missouri. And number four, I haven't a clue how to do PowerPoint. However, I'm brave. And I'm here because I'm going to swallow my nervousness and everything else and just say, I want to talk about another critical issue that's facing us, and that is gun violence, and you know that. Okay, do I have to do anything? Oh, no, wait a minute, that's cool. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our group, which I will say is the Missouri, Kansas group, Grandparents Against Gun Violence. We've talked a little bit today. We've heard the word conversation a lot, and I was prepared to co-opt that for myself, but we've heard it so many times. But we hear it a lot. Keep my distance. We hear it a lot when people, and after any gun violence issue, we're very quick to say, now's not the time to talk about it. Well, when is the time to talk about it? And as Steve Lopes talked about this morning, these kids from Parkland have told us this is the time to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it no matter what. So are we. But before I get to that, I'm going to tell you just real briefly about our group. We were founded in 2013. It happened, I had always been kind of concerned about gun violence, but also concerned about my life and my business and my children and my husband and what have you. So it was just kind of there in the back of my head. I heard a speech about 15 years ago by a Presbyterian minister, Jim Atwood, who's been against gun violence forever. But after Sandy Hook in 2012, and then after 2013, when absolutely nothing happened in Congress, which is almost impossible to believe. Uh-oh, he's coming up. I'm doing something wrong.
Making his way up. I'm going to scoot way back here.
Well, I could go here.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you. Okay, I'll try to be good. So nothing happened in Congress, so we said something's got to happen here. So there was an article in the Kansas City paper, you remember newspapers, about a group in Massachusetts called Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. And I like to refer to that column as the very beginning of whatever it is, one of those dating services. I can't think of any of them now online, Match.com. I wrote to the woman who wrote the column. I said, can you put me in touch with these people, blah, blah, blah. It all happened. So I got in touch with the two women who had founded the Massachusetts group. One of them did have a grandchild who was at Sandy Hook. Fortunately, he did not die. He was locked in a closet with his teacher for an hour and a half. So they founded the group, we founded ours. We had a meeting, the first meeting, we had about 30 people there. They were either from my exercise class or the swim group from some other one of these people. We started then. 5 years later, we have more than 1,600 supporters. Thank you. And which I will tell you more about later, and 30 partners in the city, 38 agencies in the city who also partner with us. So you'll see a little bit about those three little words on the slide, and I told you I'm not good with PowerPoint. They're really little words, but they're big words to us. Educate, advocate, participate. That's kind of the way we run our organization. But I always start every presentation by saying we are not against guns. We are against gun violence. We are for gun safety and sensible measures to reduce gun violence. And this is my selling point. I happen to be in the marketing business. You don't have to be a grandparent to join. I'm going to give you some facts. I mean, we've all heard a lot of facts today, and it's hard to remember them all. I wrote them all down. I just got to remember where my notes are. We did put a fact sheet that's in your packet about many facts that we have gathered about gun violence. But I think there's one set of facts that just consistently amaze people, so I like to talk about them. About 100,000 people a year are shot. About 38,000 of them die. That's about 104 a day. But when you break down those statistics, about 35% of those gun deaths are homicides. And while we talk a great deal, about mass shootings and school shootings, they get the attention. Homicides also include domestic abuse, road rage, inability to resolve a conflict, and of course, for those of us who live in cities, the terrible toll that gun violence takes in the inner city. In fact, our Mayor Sly James, says it's slow motion mass murder. So that's the 1/3 that's homicide, and never to downplay it. But 2/3 of the people who die from either suicide, about 2/3, 62% are suicide, and 3% are accidental. And while accidental are the smallest number, they're also mostly children, and they're often what we can do something about. Just another couple of things. 7 children and teens are killed each day by guns. A few more facts about children, because that's our interest. 4.6 million children live in a home with an unlocked, loaded gun. Every single week, a toddler shoots someone with a gun, shoots and often kills. Missouri, you'll be proud because it's not Kansas, we were the second in the nation for unintentional shootings of and by children. And then we talk about residual damage, the people who don't die. But what happens to people? We're talking so much about these children who are in cages. What's the residual damage after they get out? What's the residual damage of having seen somebody shot, or being injured yourself, or worse yet, killing somebody? Particularly, and I'm not going back to the homicides for a minute, although I think this applies to everybody. What about a child who kills his or her sibling? What's the damage? What's the cost to this person forever? So we think about those things. And what we know is whether death is by homicide, suicide, or accidents, data and experts show that the number of guns and easy access to them are major contributors to these statistics. And because suicide is now becoming a public health issue, CDC research showed that in 10 years between 2006 and 2016, the rate of what we don't call it successful suicides anymore, they call it completed suicides. It should never be a success. It's gone up 45%. So next few slides I'll kind of zip through, but they just show you a little bit, or maybe I won't zip through, there we go. This one the number is suicides by sex. And you can see the blue line at the top is the total number. And you can see there rises and falls. There was a big rise, and I'm not sure why, in around 2006 and 7, shortly before the big 2008. But then you begin to see the lines going up. The blue lines are total. The kind of orange lines are men, and the dotted lines are women. Suicide, if you remove teens, sadly, because that's a whole different story, suicide is primarily a male problem. By age, you can see that you can figure out the blue columns are 2000 through 2005, and the orange columns are 2011 through 2013. And you can see that the age groups that are the most commonly have suicides are 15 to 24 and 25 to 34. Now, sadly, these numbers are from 2005. The numbers are bigger, the teens keeps getting bigger, and they stop at age 54. And what we know now dramatically is men, white rural men, 65 and over, have a huge incidence of suicide. And then finally, just as means, we talk a lot about means matter, meaning what are the means that people use to try to take their own life. And again, I'm sure you're going to be able to imagine that the tallest column are firearms, the next column is suffocation, and then it goes down, as you can see. So you see it's the prevalence of guns. That's number one. They're there. They're everywhere. But the other piece of that that many of us don't understand is they're also, sadly, the most successful. People who use a gun to try to take their own life succeed about 92% of the time. Those numbers go down dramatically with strangulation, with pill overdose, with all other kinds of things. So again, we consider the fact that there are so many guns to be a major problem. Again, just a stat that it doesn't happen to be on our fact sheet. About 218,000 Americans in that same 10-year period took their own lives, and that's 21,000 a year. That's just unacceptable, just unacceptable. But what we try to understand, we talk about the prevalence of guns, but we also understand that this is a country that we have about 265 million guns in this country. That's almost as many as there are people. So we're not going to get rid of them, no matter what all the scare people try to talk about. Nobody's coming for your guns, and we have to accept the fact that people own guns. We're not going to demonize gun owners. There are a lot of reasons, which as you'll see on the slide, which I moved too fast. We're not going to demonize gun owners. There are solid reasons for people to own a gun. And it's very important to understand that. I mean, the thread that has come through our whole conversation today is the ability to understand where somebody else is coming from and to try to get in their shoes and try to understand them. So we understand that some people own guns. They have wonderful memories of going hunting with grandpa or going hunting with dad. It's a family heirloom that's been handed down. People like it for sport, for hunting, for target shooting, for collecting. I imagine there's some people in this room that are gun owners. That's wonderful. God love you. Just keep them safe. That's all we ask. We don't care who owns a gun. Just keep them safe. The one thing at the bottom that's very hard for those of us in the gun violence prevention field to accept is about 67% of people asked will tell you that they own guns for safety, for their own safety. And it's really a myth. Guns do not make you safer. Again, data shows that about 22 times more likely to be killed by your own gun than you are by an intruder. But again, as we have talked today, facts aren't always persuasive to a great many people. And people who think that guns will protect them, there's nothing we can say about them. So what we say is, then let's talk about gun safety. Let's talk about keeping your guns locked, keep them stored safely, and get on with it. We understand that the Supreme Court in 2008 made the decision that individuals had the right to own a gun. Whether we believe that, whether we think that was right, we've already talked about some of their not-so-great decisions. This was not one of them, but it's there. But even Justice Scalia said something, and you're not going to be able to read it, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but he was the most outspoken and wrote the supporting opinion for the 2008 Heller case, which did allow for individual ownership. He said, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. Nothing, in our opinion, should be taken to cast doubt on longstanding prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons, the mentally ill, or should there be laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualification on the sale of firearms. So he understood, as most of us do, we all talk about the rights that are given us in the Constitution, the right to free speech. We've all heard the example. Yes, we have it, but you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater. So the right to own a gun should be no different. It should not come with no regulations. And then we put at the bottom, what about our rights? Do those of us who are concerned about gun violence, do we have a right to feel safe in our home or in our school or in our community? We think so. So it's kind of the background to how we operate, what we think about. But we do support, there are some things that we support very clearly. And when we started, we were solely focused on legislation. We were so incensed about what did not happen in Congress that we were going to get these laws passed. Gosh darn it, and it's going to happen now. We still want to support those things. There's a quote that we hear very often from a group I don't have to name. It just has initials. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And we've kind of changed that a bit to say guns don't kill people, dangerous people with guns kill people. So our point is, let's see if we can't regulate and get around the fact that dangerous people have been able to get guns. So we support background checks on all gun sales. Currently, about 60% of guns sold have a background check. A federally licensed gun dealer must conduct a background check. That means, I'm very good at math here, 40% do not. 40% of the people who get a gun have no background check. We know nothing about them. So we use the example sometimes. You're going to the airport. There are 100 of you getting ready to board a plane. 60 of you take off your jacket. You empty your pockets. Some of us don't have to take our shoes off anymore. But you have to do all this stuff, and they pat you down, and they do the whole thing, 60 of us. 40 of the people in your group just hop on the plane. How do you feel about that? Do you wonder who they are? Do they have a right to be on the plane? Or what do they have more than 3 ounces of nail polish or whatever? So we think let's just make it easy. Let's do a background check on every single person who buys a gun. Seems pretty logical. Since the Brady background check was passed in 1993 after the whole Reagan incidents, that law required licensed gun dealers. That's when that law went into effect. Licensed gun dealers had to conduct a background check. More than 2.4 million sales have been stopped. Somewhere in there, some dangerous person did not get a gun. But the next one is closing the loopholes. There are 2 very major loopholes. One is called the gun show loophole, and that's really what I just described, that federally licensed gun dealers at a gun show have to do the background check, but gun shows attract all kinds of individuals and unlicensed people, so plenty of people can buy a gun at a gun show and then turn around and either use it or sell it. Then there's the 72-hour loophole that says everybody who does a background check has 72 hours to complete it. If they don't get it complete in 72 hours, they're free to sell that gun. Now, some I believe it's Dick's and maybe Cabela's that have said, no, we're going to wait until we finish a background check, no matter how long it takes. If that loophole had been closed, Dylan Roof would not have killed 8 people in the church in Charleston. Then the next 2 are pretty easy. I don't need to take much time for you. Ban on assault, now we say assault-style weapons, and limiting magazine size. That ought to just be basic. It shouldn't be very questionable. The CDC funding is another kind of scary piece. In 1998, there was an amendment called the Dickey Amendment that was added to some bill. I don't even know what it was. But that curtailed the CDC dramatically. It said that any funds given to the CDC to study injury prevention could not be used to advocate or promote gun control. And along with that amendment came a cut in funding, and it effectively just quashed any public health research into the effects of gun violence. Now, in 2018, the omnibus budget bill was in fact passed, and there's a little tiny sentence in there that says the CDC has the authority to conduct research on the causes of gun violence, but they cannot make recommendations. So they can gather all the data, but then they just put it in their desk where the legislators keep the bills they don't want. There's no funding, there's no encouragement, so nothing's going to change. So that's a long way of saying we started in legislation, but then one day we looked around and we said, wait a minute, we live in Missouri and we live in Kansas. So focusing on legislation, while it is a must, is pretty unfulfilling. And I think we as volunteers all understand volunteers need to succeed. And success is not really going to testify in finding that the bill passes anyway, or writing to your legislator and hearing nothing, or getting a form letter that might have to do with farm subsidies or nothing. We decided that we really needed to do something that would make a difference in the community and also to our volunteers. So here are a few slides about what we do now. I want to be very clear. We continue to advocate against bad legislation, and if by some chance a good bill would ever come up, we would also advocate for that passage. But while we wait, we began to think about what we could do to make a bigger impact. And we work with a group in St. Louis called Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice. And I think it's a very similar group to Women for Kansas. They have a very broad portfolio. They're not just gun violence focused. They focus on kids, they focus on domestic violence, but they had started a program called Lock It for Love, and they asked us if we would take it to our side of the state. And so again, if we go back to the quote that it's dangerous people who kill with guns, we start to think about who are dangerous people. And generally, sometimes though we're tired, we think about it. We don't generally think about toddlers being dangerous people. But a toddler who finds a gun sitting on the nightstand, a loaded gun sitting on the nightstand, suddenly becomes a dangerous person. A teen who didn't get enough likes on Facebook, didn't get invited to the prom, isn't in the right group, who ends up taking a long-term solution to a short-term problem, is a dangerous person. And we're learning more and more now that some seriously demented people or people suffering from Alzheimer's and are in a home with unlocked, unsafely stored guns, those are dangerous people too. So to address all of those things, we launched Lock It for Love, and it's very simple. It is a very proactive program where we take gun locks out into the community, and we distribute them to families who have children in the home or who have guns in the home. What's different about our program, and many of you may know this, you can get a gun lock. They're not very good gun locks, but you can get a little gun lock from a mental health association, from hospitals, every police station. Sometimes libraries have them. There's lots of places you can go to get one. But many people don't know it. Many people don't want to bother. Lots of people don't want to go to the police station to get one. So our feeling was, okay, you're not going to come to us, we're going to come to you. So when we began, two of our biggest supporters in Kansas City were Children's Mercy Hospital and the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. They've been partners with us since we began this program just 1 year ago. So in the beginning, the police, because they all are very familiar with what goes on in the community, they invited us to go with them to community events, and we'd set up our little program. You can see our little orange people standing there, and we've got a nice display with gun locks. And you will notice there's always a policeman with us. We believe that people need the gun locks we give out are expensive. They're $4.50 a piece. And so we don't want to just hand them out, go out in the audience and hand them out. We want somebody to come up. We talk to them about some of the statistics. We have a little handout we give them. And the police officer shows them how to use the gun. He asks how to use the lock. What kind of gun do you have? Here's how you would use it. And so we think that people really leave. We've kind of disabused them of the fact that gun locks are it's too hard, and what if somebody broke in? How would I get the key out? We've made it very simple. So, as I say, we launched the program in late July of last year. As of today, we've been to 47 events, which is almost one a month. More than one a month. Okay, I said I did math, I don't. It's a lot of events, 47 weeks, almost one a week. And we've distributed over 1,000 locks. And that's going to change because in the next 2 months, September and October, we already know we have 15 events lined up. So we feel good about it, and we know that somewhere we have either saved a life for sure or helped somebody understand the importance of safely storing a gun. Another thing that we're doing in the educate piece, if you remember, we're educate, advocate, and participate. We thought, again, very early on, that we needed to bring this issue front and center. Remember, this is 5 years ago. This was before Parkland, and people didn't talk about it all the time. So we created a program under us called Heartland Coalition Against Gun Violence, and that's where we sought community partners. We looked around for people. Not everybody was single-focused like we, because Moms Demand Action had not really started yet, but people who had gun violence as a concern. And the first year, again, just like when we started, it was pretty personal. We got 7 co-sponsors. And our first conference, we had maybe 50 people or so in a small church, and it was called Gun Violence, Finding Common Ground, Making a Difference. The next year, we had a speaker. It was called, it always starts with gun violence, a public health issue, because people were beginning to understand that it truly is. Gun violence is contagious. It has lots of the imprints of what any kind of public health issue is. So we had a speaker from our public health department. Then the third year was gun violence, the culture of fear. And we didn't talk a lot about fear here, although certainly fear of immigrants is a big factor. That's what that man tries to engender all the time. So the culture of fear, people's fear either way, people's fear that they're going to lose their guns, or people's fear about guns and the people who have them. And that was the first year we had raised enough money to get a nationally known speaker. We had Leonard Pitts, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, and he was excellent. Last year, we called it Gun Violence, Keeping Our Children Safe, and Nicole Hockley, whose son Dylan was in fact killed at Sandy Hook, was our speaker. This year, mark your calendars, it's just a quick drive up the street there to Kansas City. October 8th, Monday, October 8th, Columbus Day, is our 5th annual community forum, and it's called Gun Violence, Changing the Conversation. And our keynote speaker is Candace Leitner, who's the founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And we know, we have a great deal to learn from her in how she was able to gather people together to join her in this effort to end drinking and driving. And she didn't do it by trying to outlaw liquor. She did it in many different ways. I'll know more next year if you invite me back. I don't know what she's going to say. I know you get people on your side. This year, we already have 33 sponsors of our forum, and I think by the time we're finished, we'll probably be closer to 40. I think we'll learn a lot from Candace, and we talked a little bit about the kids, and I'll talk about them again. The whole arena, of course, of social media has changed everything. So what she had to do, one way, we can learn from her, and then we can double her efforts, our efforts now through social media. So she will be our keynote speaker, and then we have a panelist, and one of our panel members is Micah Kubik. So need I say more? Then we can close for the day, although we have lots more planned. So there's still time to register, and anybody wants to know, you can ask me about it. So that's basically, those are our 2 main programs, but we do other things too. We kind of put it under the umbrella of speak up and show up. We participated, and I was able to speak at the Women's March in January of 2017. Again, we participated and spoke in March for Our Lives, KC, and that was an outgrowth, of course, of the Parkland tragedy. We work, every year we do some kind, in the coalition with our 30 sponsors, we observe December 14th, which is the anniversary of Sandy Hook. There's a day called Wear Orange Day, which is June 2nd, and orange is the color of gun violence prevention. And that came about because of hunters. Hunters wear orange. This woman knows everything. I'm calling her up in a minute. So Wear Orange Day, and we encourage people to do that. And this year we joined with people in the urban community to do something on Juneteenth, which is a major holiday, a major observance for the African American community. So we work really hard to keep this issue front and center. We also do media interviews whenever anybody asks, sometimes even when they don't ask, we'll just reach out and call them and share our opinion. We write letters to the editor, we do op-eds. I was on a task force with the mayor-appointed Citizens Task Force Against Gun Violence. So we're out there as much as we can. And I'll tell you real quickly about something we're going to start, which may surprise you. I was with the man the other day who's going to be a huge, wonderful advocate with us, and he puts displays on his front yard all the time, changes them about gun violence, and he always puts an American flag there. I said, ooh, American flag. I mean, that's what all the conservatives do. Trump hugs it, you know, ick. But then he said, why should we let them? Why should they co-opt the American flag? It's ours. So we're going to start being like all... We just ordered 150 flag pins, and we're going to outdo those country-loving, flag-loving legislators by wearing ours right with our grandparents of gun violence buttons or T-shirts. It's our flag, too. Then we have some things, you know, God knows you've been told enough today of what you're supposed to do. So who was it Kay who said, I've got this long list of stuff. I'm going to add a few, but the good part is you already do most of it. So some of it I'm not even going to tell you. But one thing I am going to tell you about is something that we put together. We call it Words Matter. This is a thesaurus of about 76 phrases that are used on a daily basis. We talk all the time about the United States has a gun culture, and we do, and we know it. Part of that gun culture is our vocabulary, and it's there all the time. And we're just trying to say, let's see if we can't think of some other words to use. So when people tell me they're going to shoot me an email, never mind, it's okay, just send it, it's fine with me. I don't target somebody anymore. We don't target an issue. We focus on it. You can do that. A lot of times I'm in tears because I think I'm under the gun. No, I just have a deadline. So we've got these, and as I say, I've sent them to all the media who, I don't know, use them for coasters, I don't know what, because the headlines are still terrible. But it's just another way of trying to get people to understand how often we use those phrases. And I know my own friends, they'll say something, I'll aim for this and I'll just give them the look, and they, oh, never mind, I'm sorry. So I'd love to distribute more of these to you if anybody wants them, and you've got my email address, but we think they're terrific. Another program that we encourage people to do is ASK, which is Asking Saves Kids. And this is an initiative of the Brady campaign, and I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It has to do with when your kids are little, they play in the neighborhood and you know everything. When kids go to school, now they have play dates, right? They don't go to somebody's house, they have a play date, and you had to be texted to find out if your kid is invited. But once they go, sometimes you don't know where they're going. So we encourage mothers, we try to talk to PTAs when we can, to say, don't be afraid to say to somebody who you don't know, do you have guns in the home? And if the person says yes, you say, that's fine. Are they locked? Are they secure? The person waffles or doesn't want to answer, you just say, you know what, my kid is so curious, it makes me concerned. Why don't we just play at my house? So A, it keeps your kids safe, and B, once again, you are reinforcing gun safety. We're not demonizing the fact that you own a gun, we're just saying, do you keep it safe? Then be aware of legislation, and again, I'm not going to beat you up on this one, you all know it, and you know what to do. We contact our legislators, we write letters, we do all that stuff. So what else do I have there? I probably won't be coming to Wichita a lot, but if you know somebody in the Kansas City metro area, whatever, always love to go to community events or any kind of event, or churches, synagogues, we go everywhere with our Lock It for Love display. And if you know anybody about it, this is tailored pretty much to when we speak in Kansas City. Then I encourage people to join Grandparents Against Gun Violence because, again, we are 501c3, we're all volunteer, we're self-funded, and we have two big projects. One is the community forum, costs money, particularly now that we get national speakers, and our buying the gun locks. So more about what you can do, and I think this is important, and we tell our people this a lot, is support the kids, support the students. These Parkland kids, and then the outgrowth of the March for Our Lives all over the country, these kids have moved us to a tipping point. They have forced us to have the conversation. They have confronted their legislators. They don't know what they can't do, and they're not interested when we say we tried that already. They're just going to do it. So our job is to say, you know, we used to say, follow me. Nah, you just tell me where to go and I'll do it. I'll do what you tell. First of all, they can figure out PowerPoints. I cannot. Those 5 kids who you see there were kids that we worked with when we did the March for Our Lives in Kansas City, and then they came and spoke to our whole group. We meet monthly, once a month, that is monthly, for different kinds of educational meetings. We have speakers, and we've talked about the Second Amendment and mental health, domestic violence. Our last meeting was Monday, and we had Professor Kevin Wilmot, who's the KU professor, who was already famous for wearing the bulletproof vest in his way of protesting the concealed carry on KU campus. And then, of course, you know he's the co-writer with Spike Lee of the Black Klansman movie. So Kevin Wilmot and a young woman named Megan Jones, who's an activist, a gun violence activist, came and spoke to our group. And we had over 100 people there, and they were just thrilled. And as a result of that, we are going to get even more insistent about advocacy to our own members. We have a very good group of interesting people, but we decided after that meeting that we're going to, you know, in the old days you called it a committee, but nobody wants to be on a committee. So we've named this the Advocacy Project, and we're going to have an advocacy action at every meeting, and people will stay and do something. Sign a petition. That's why I asked about can individuals sponsor a bill or write a bill. We're going to write a bill, and we're going to find somebody to sponsor it, and we're going to sign. So that's what he's kind of encouraged us to do. The other thing we've talked about, again, under the umbrella of Speak Up, Show Up, be politically active. Talked about that a lot today. Contacting your legislators. Having conversations with civil conversations, and we talk a lot about that, and I think we all know, we just know it instinctively because we're so cool, right? We just understand. A conversation is two-way. If you're going to start a conversation figuring I'm going to change that person's mind, or it's got to be I win, you lose, don't even bother, because we wouldn't either. Imagine some of the things that matter to you, and think if somebody sat down with you and got in your face with a conversation, would that change your mind? But they might give you a fact that would make you think. That's why the fact that I gave you about the percentage of homicides, suicides, and accidental deaths is so important, because people think of gun violence and then they think of homicide. And being able to say to somebody, can we find some common ground? Can we all just assume, take a chance, can we all assume that kids and all of us should feel safe in their school or in their home or at Chipotle, not having to sit next to somebody who's packing heat? Maybe if you can come to those kinds of common things, then maybe you can begin to make a difference. So we're real big on having conversations. So then this is kind of a joke. You haven't heard this before. What's the most important thing you can do? Vote. Here's what we say, because we love to mess with the NRA phrases. They say the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And we say the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy or gal with a vote. So these are the things we tell people when we go out in the community. But we were, as you can tell, we were all asked to give you all action steps, like you didn't have enough. So I'm just going to say, building on what we tell our civilians, so to speak, what you can do is just keep your own members, the people in your chapters, informed and enthused and up in arms and ready to vote. You can, oh, see, I did it. Wait a minute. We don't even have it on this thing. And we reprint this about every 6 months. We've got under fire is being criticized, under the gun. Okay, got it, thank you very much. You're gonna get your people enthused to go out and vote. That's what you're gonna do. That's great. You might work on registering people to vote or working with the League of Women Voters. Again, we're big believers in working with other people. I mean, in reinventing the wheel's kind of dumb. League of Women Voters knows how to do it. So that's who we work. Getting out the vote is critical, and I was talking to Steve Lopes a little because people always say, talk to your friends and tell them to vote. Well, my friends look at me like, what, you think I'm an idiot? Of course I'm going to vote. So we talked about maybe talking to your children or your grandchildren. I mean, I can't talk to my neighbors either because from the signs in my yard, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But talking to people who you know are going to vote correctly, you want to encourage them to vote. And so think about people that you can encourage. So I'm almost through, you're doing great. As if you needed any kind of inspiration, this is our inspiration. It's kind of like what you saw before, the 17 young men who had been killed by gun violence. These are kids who were killed, lost their lives in Kansas City to gun violence over the last 2 years. That's what we're about. I'm here to say thank you for inviting us. It's just wonderful to be able to share our concern with people who understand it and who I feel very comfortable knowing will go out and think about it and talk about it, and that's our hope. Thank you very much.